All right. So the sessions have been, we're super excited to present the sessions to everyone. Our first session was strengthening your relationship with your teen. We felt like that had a great impact. And then this week, especially, understanding your teen's anxiety. A lot of times in our roles as administrators, principals, counselors, we encounter parents that are, just reaching out for, what do I do? This is happening at home. How do I manage it? How do I adjust? And as a parent, and I'm a parent, I have two girls at home, fifth grade and third. You want to be able to help them, and sometimes you want to have the right strategies to help them. So that was our intent for these sessions, and we were fortunate that Tri-County was able to work together with us. As you guys know, Tri-County has a partnership with Wayne Township Public Schools, where they offer counseling services all the way from elementary up through secondary. So we're fortunate. We have two awesome counselors at the high school that we work with. And so we're super pumped to have them and all the assistance they provide for our students. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ms. Canzone, who presented last week, and now will be presenting again on understanding your teen's anxiety. So we'll let her go from here on in. You could ask questions, just raise your hand. I'll stay on and be able to jump in at times to answer questions, but if we can, we'll try to wait till the end so that we could have like a nice conversation and discussion about it all, right? So thank you so much, and Kelly, you are on.
Hi, everyone. I hope you all had a chance or a moment even to just enjoy this beautiful day. I know it's funny that, I always think it's funny when my talk of the day is on anxiety. Because there's always a moment during my day where my, anxiety gets peaked and I sort of have a moment of laughter that I get to talk to people about anxiety. I was on hold with Google today for almost 2 hours, and my anxiety was just, kind of really all over the place, but I was able to get through it. And luckily I don't have to spend too much time on the phone with Google. But so today we're going to talk about understanding your teen's anxiety. How to be part of the solution. There are things that you can do. You don't have to feel helpless and hopeless to your teen's anxiety. You don't have to sort of feel like you are captive to them and that there's nothing you can do to help. There are definitely things you can do to help, and we're going to talk about those today. As Scott said wonderfully, my name is Kelly Canzone. I've been a psychotherapist for 26 years. I am also the owner of Tri-County Behavioral Care. That I own a mental health company with multiple divisions of the company, and really our entire focus is to bring value to people that are seeking mental health care and be able to bring really good access to that care. So part of that is doing presentations like this so that you can learn a little bit more about how to help the people that live under your roof and that you are tasked with caring for. So the first thing we're going to do is start to talk about, I just kind of said this. Oh, and I'm a mom. I have 2 kids, and one of my kids has anxiety, and the other of my daughter has anxiety. My son has moments of anxiety, sort of moments of stress. He has a very high caseload, course load at school. So his stress is a little bit higher than some of his peers. And my daughter, has had anxiety since she was 5. She was actually diagnosed with anxiety. So I also understand what it is like to have a child in your house that cannot, at a certain developmental age, really control their anxiety. And all the way up through, she's 12 now. And, we'll be able to talk about how to go if you have small children with anxieties up to big kids with anxieties. So how to be part of the solution? The first thing you want to do is start with a growth mindset with your kids. Let's talk a little bit about anxiety and what anxiety actually is. Anxiety is the inability to get past a moment that feels like you're not in control of. So I'm anxious about a test. I'm anxious about my bank account. I'm anxious about going to school today. I'm anxious about getting together with my family for the holiday. And I just gave some examples all the way from a small child up to an adult, because everyone experiences anxiety at a different level, right? Small children experience anxiety that's developmentally appropriate. Separation anxiety, sleep anxiety, right? Some of that is developmentally appropriate. When we start to see kids that are 5, 6, 7, 8 still experiencing that same level of anxiety that maybe a 2-year-old was experiencing, that's where we can start to see a problem. And then as adults, we still have anxieties, right? There's still things that we feel anxious about an upcoming review, anxious about whatever it is. That level is sort of like here on the anxiety meter, right? Normal everyday anxiety or developmentally appropriate anxiety. The next level is anxiety that isn't necessarily developmentally appropriate, but can be worked through fairly easily. And then the next level of anxiety is anxiety that's not developmentally appropriate, that cannot be easily worked through. And then the next level, which is the highest level of anxiety, is anxiety that needs to be treated no matter what age. Okay. Some anxiety can be treated with outpatient psychotherapy, and some anxiety has to be treated with medication. It just depends on the level of anxiety that the person or child is experiencing. But as a parent, right, there's really two sides to this, one of which is our own anxiety and the other of which is parenting kids with anxiety. If you start with a growth mindset out of the gate, right, in your home, and even for yourself, which will inherently trickle down to your kids and model for your kids, a growth mindset is things will be okay. I don't know that they're going to be okay, but I don't know that they're not going to be okay. I don't have proof either way. So I'm going to start out with a growth mindset. I am a growing person. I am doing things in the world. I'm seeking my goals. I'm attaining my goals. Is everything perfect? No. Are a lot of things great? Yes. That's a growth mindset. Okay. And I keep kind of going like this because it expands, right? Like the possibilities expand, the positivity expands. I'm not talking about positive psychology. I'm just talking about the ability to see that things are going to be okay. It's a very basic thought, right? And really, when we're anxious about a test or going to school without our mom or dad, or, you know, as a parent or as an adult, you know, having a review with my boss, those things I don't know are going to be okay. So that's where my anxiety comes from, is I'm anxious because I don't know if I'm going to be okay. A growth mindset says, you know what? It might be fine. I'm going to be okay. Even if I get a bad review today, I'm going to be okay. What we have to do as parents is tell our kid that same exact thing. You're going to go to school today and you're going to have a great time. Are you going to miss me? Probably. Is it going to be difficult for a couple minutes? Probably. But are you going to have an awesome time today? Probably. That's a growth mindset. So really starting off with your kids, talking about those possibilities. The other component of a growth mindset is really that modeling, that our kids are able to see us say, it's going to be okay, versus, I don't know if it's going to be okay, but what if it's not? But what if it's not okay? Well, believing in yourself and your ability to get through hard things is also a growth mindset. A growth mindset says what's in my rearview mirror is worse. It was harder than what's in my windshield. Everything in front of me, I can do because I've done hard things behind. I've done hard things in the past. Okay. A growth mindset says I've learned so much that I can handle whatever's thrown at me. I've been through things that have allowed me to see that I can handle what's in front of me. And when our kids see us do that, when our kids hear us do that, because anxiety really is, it starts with speech, right? It starts with, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, I'm blank, okay? When our kids hear, I'm anxious about X, Y, and Z, but I think it's going to be okay because I can handle it. And even if I can't handle it, I'll figure out how to handle it. Our kids learn a growth mindset. So number one, they hear us doing it for ourselves, and then they hear us doing it for them. I can handle anything, and I know you can handle anything. The other part of a growth mindset is our kids hearing that we've got it, right? When our kids are anxious, we can remind them that they are capable, but that we are also capable as their parents, right? My daughter was really nervous about going to a party. She doesn't really like huge groups of people. She was super nervous about it. And I said, you know what? You're going to have a great time. I know you're going to have a great time, but I know you don't know that right now. So borrow from me my belief that you're going to have a good time. But if you don't, I'll come get you. You don't have to stay in that anxious moment. But if you're having a great time, you don't need to call me. But if you want to, I'm here. And our kids need to lean on us when they can't get through it themselves, but then we have to give them solutions. What are the solutions to the anxiety? Now, remember I was talking about that scale, right? Normal developmental anxiety. Anxiety that isn't necessarily developmentally appropriate, but can be shifted easily. Anxiety that's not developmentally appropriate and can't be shifted easily, therapy land. That's where you need a therapist. Anxiety that can't be shifted easily and is getting in the way of every single thing you're doing all day is possibly medication land. Okay, you've got to be able to bring it down and be able to function on a daily basis. So let's now talk about how anxiety affects us. I talked a little bit before about anxiety being speech. I feel anxious. I feel X, Y, and Z. But we can also see anxiety. We can also feel anxiety. I always say that anxiety comes here, and in your stomach, right? So right in the middle of your chest, right in the middle of your throat, or right in the middle of your stomach is usually where people feel anxiety. And sometimes people get a headache from anxiety. But what can also happen is the longer someone stays anxious, they also might become depressed, because anxiety requires you to take yourself down and calm. Depression requires you to get up and take action. Anxiety is the opposite. Anxiety, we need to calm ourselves, breathe, meditate, okay? With depression, you want to get up. You want to be active. With anxiety, you want to stay calm. Some of the best ways that we can help anxiety affect our body, or when anxiety is affecting our body, things that we can do. You breathe in for 5, hold for 5, breathe out for 5. Breathe in for 5, hold for 5, breathe out for 5. Now that's 5 seconds, right? So breathe in, hold, release. 5 times. So it's the 4 5s, right? The 4 5s. Breathe in, hold it for 5. Blow out for 5. And you do that 4 times. When you do that, when your body has gotten up here, your body's going, ah, doing that brings it down 1, down 2, down 3, down 4. When anxiety starts to affect your body, and I go like this on purpose, because what is the anxiety covering? It's covering my head. It's covering my ability to make decisions. It's covering my ability to calm myself down. So when you're in an anxious moment, or your child is in an anxious moment, and you help them to do that breathing, maybe you don't get all 4 cycles of breathing done. Maybe you only get 1 or 2. But what you do is you're lowering your heart rate, you're centering your breath, and you're taking control of an out of control anxious moment. Breathe in for 5, hold it for 5, breathe out for 5. And you do that 4 times. Okay? I want everybody to take a second And I want you, we're all going to do this together. Ready? Breathe in for 5. Hold it. Breathe out. Can everybody feel the stress release in that? You don't have to say anything. But if you do that 4 times, you'll be calm. The goal, obviously, is to start with the growth mindset so that before you even get to that anxious moment, you are calm, right? You are helping yourself before your body starts to react. The body reacting is the last thing. The first thing we do is we think and we speak. The last thing we feel is the anxiety in our body. Long-term effects of anxiety are really severe, right? I mean, long-term effects of anxiety, we've seen cardiovascular issues, blood sugar issues. Again, you know, looking toward depression and anxiety over time causing depression. That fear that anxiety instills really creating a sadness that we can't move beyond it. But anxiety also affects our body because it releases unhappy hormones. There's a couple hormones that are released sometimes when we give a hug or, you know, we're laughing, right? And they're called happy hormones. But anxiety releases cortisol, and cortisol is a crappy hormone. Cortisol makes us unwell and unhealthy, and it makes us sick, and it makes us, you know, sometimes gain weight and overweight and all that kind of stuff. And that anxiety can really affect your body when you stay up here all the time. And I always say, you know, many people with anxiety don't have to stay on medication forever, but certainly a couple months of an anti-anxiety regimen can help people that are experiencing their anxiety up here. Really just bring it down a little bit to take the edge off and help you gain some control over it while you're learning skills in how to deal with the anxiety every day in therapy. Breathe. Breathe. Oh, sorry. Let me get back to that slide. So breathe, right? The one thing we can do is breathe. When we do that, we release oxytocin, which is a happy hormone, okay? Oxytocin is like kryptonite to cortisol. So when you're breathing, it's not just the act of the breath. It's when you're breathing, you're actually taking in chemicals that are allowing your body to release oxytocin, which is a happy hormone. And you're also able to calm yourself down. Okay, next, talk through it. Someone said last week that people have to hear something 7 times before they will do it, 7 times before they'll believe it. What does that mean? It means that if I tell my son to pick up his clothes, I need to tell him 7 times before he'll remember that it's important. Well, probably 22 times, but someone I heard last week said 7 times. When you are talking to your kids about anxiety, they're not going to believe you the first time. They're not going to believe you the second time. You might go through a number of times of anxiety with your kid over the same subject. Going to school, going to a friend's house, going to bed without you, right? I hear lots of kids sleeping in their parents' beds. Sometimes, you know, when my daughter was at the height of her anxiety, she was totally sleeping in our bed, right? But when I told her, you got this, she didn't believe me. And then I had to say it again, you got this. And I'd put her in her bed and I'd say, you got this. And then I'd put her in her bed and I'd say, you got this. And now at 12 years old, she puts herself to bed because she's got this. But how long did that take me? It took me a long time. Having a child with that level of anxiety that needs to be treated is hard. Having a child with developmental anxiety is exhausting just enough. But having a child that has anxiety that's not developmentally appropriate is just as exhausting. It feels like it never ends. And that's why seeking treatment for that is super important. It can be very destructive if you don't take care of it. And sometimes with those kids, telling them you got this is just not simply enough. They need a therapist. They need medication to help them control the levels of chemical in their brain that are not firing the proper way. It's DNA, man. It's DNA. It's DNA that our kids sometimes suffer from anxiety because we do. You know, it's the idea of nature versus nurture. What came first? Did I teach my kid how to be anxious, or is anxiety part of their DNA? I can tell you, I come from a really long line of people that have anxiety. I know that part of my daughter's anxiety was passed down, you know, in a DNA kind of way. Just like she got her blonde hair from my husband, she got anxiety from my side of the family. She got a lot of other good things too, but she got anxiety. But the reality is, if you don't help them through that or try to figure out what level your kid is at, you're not really going to get the proper treatment from them, right? And again, I'm going to go back to developmentally appropriate, not developmentally appropriate, but easily worked through, not developmentally appropriate, not easily worked through, and not developmentally appropriate and really needs medication to monitor. It's really getting in the way of their life. Maybe they've missed too much school or something like that. So I want to caution you, because if we look at this step ladder, here is the you got this land. Even here is you got this land. Here it's you got this, and we're going to go see your therapist land. And here is I'm going to help you get this. Okay. I'm going to find a doctor. I'm going to find a therapist that can help you get this, because we can't get it on our own. I know that many of you on this call right now can understand what it's like to have anxiety at a place where you cannot manage it yourself. And once you start taking that medication, many people find a lot of relief from it, right? You don't go from a 10 to a 2, right? The medication helps you go from a 10 to a 6, and then you find a therapist and you try to manage that from a 6 to a 4. But anxiety, it doesn't really go away per se. It's kind of like diabetes, right? If you want to alter your diabetes, you've either got to change your diet, and it's a constant thing, or you've got to go on medication and it's a constant thing, right? And that's how anxiety is. Developmentally appropriate anxiety goes away over time, right? Our kids don't have separation anxiety from us when they're 18, 19, 20, right? They have separation anxiety from us when they're 2, 3, and 4. Many kids have it again when they're 8, 9, and 10. And then again when they go away to college, but there's moments of it, right? And those are considered developmentally appropriate. Other kids have separation anxiety their entire lives, and we have to look at why they're feeling anxious to leave their parents. That's where a therapist can really help you decipher where the anxiety is coming from, and assess how you know, if it's biological or if it's learned and environmental. So talk yourself through it. If I have anxiety on a daily basis, which listen, I work in mental health, right? There's a ton of times where I deal with really, really stressful things. And sometimes I get anxious for my kids, that I see other kids going through really difficult struggles. And I kind of am anxious as a parent that I don't want my kids to go through those struggles. How do I manage that? I talk to myself through it. I don't maybe say you got this, right? But I say, I've given my kids a really great foundation. Or maybe I even talk to my kids about it and say, this is something I saw today and I'm really worried about it. Let's talk about it so I can help you understand that these things are out there in life. Talking through your anxiety helps you to not internalize it so that it becomes sadness and depression, or becomes a physical outcome. Once it becomes a physical outcome, it's very hard to get back. So we want to make sure that we do what we need to do for our anxiety before we see the physical manifestation. With regard to your kids, if your child is isolating and saying they're anxious, they may already be at a place where they need an intervention from a therapist or a psychiatrist, or even their medical doctor. If your child is so anxious that they are unable to leave the house, leave their bedroom, go to school, that requires a higher level of intervention, okay? They are not able to handle that on their own. and you are not able to handle that on your own. And that's okay. It's just a signal that their anxiety is at that level that it's no longer able to be managed independently. Okay. When your child has a moment of anxiety, they're really anxious about a test. If that continues, right, throughout their school year, maybe getting them to a therapist to teach them some techniques to calm themselves down before test taking. But what we see is that if they have a test taking anxiety, that doesn't necessarily mean they have anxiety across the board. It means they have test taking anxiety. And that can be managed by skill-based learning about how to bring calm to the test taking experience, or changing the environment of the test taking experience. But it's not what we call pervasive, in that they don't have anxiety in all areas of their life. Okay. Once the child is, or once your child is in their bedroom, not able to move, not able to get out of the house, that's when you need that really higher level intervention. This is really important. Sort of looks like an anxious picture over here, but it's not meant to be. It means face the situation head on. Don't wait for your anxiety to go away. Don't wait for your child's anxiety to go away. If you look at those different steps on that ladder, the different steps include, right, being able to manage it so that it's not part of their daily life. If your child's anxiety is part of their daily life, you need intervention from a therapist. If your child's anxiety is changing the way your family operates, the way your family interacts, you need an intervention from a therapist. Anxiety can come out many different ways from kids, so we're going to talk about that now. Anxiety really shows up in 4 different ways. The first way it shows up is in crying, right? You'll see your child, their emotion is fear, okay? And the fear is, I'm afraid to go to school, I'm afraid to leave you, right? The fear is content-based. They know what they're afraid of. I'm afraid I'm going to get a bad grade. I'm afraid to go out of the house. I'm afraid, fill in the blank. Whatever your child says they are afraid of or they don't want to do, right? When you see your child in that moment, they're crying, they're fearful. That's the first way that kids, and usually smaller kids, express their anxiety. Okay, so that's one. We usually can see that fairly easily, right? We can bring a lot of empathy to that situation. We can say what's wrong, it's okay, you don't have to cry, whatever that is, right? But always talk through it. Instead of saying, stop crying, what the hell's wrong with you? What the heck's wrong with you? Talk through it. Why do you think you're crying right now? It doesn't have to sound like a kumbaya moment, right? We don't have to sound like we're on Little House on the Prairie. You just say, dude, what are you going through right now? What can I help you with? Why do you think you're crying? It's okay. It's okay that you're crying, but why? Let's talk about the why. Did something happen today, right? Talk them through it. So that's the first way, is the crying. The second way is really less obvious because it's really negative. And most parents, when they see what I'm about to say, react in a very absolutely not kind of way. Kids express their fear in anger. Kids express their anxiety in anger, right? They don't want to go into the classroom, so they punch someone. They don't want to play on the playground, so they get in trouble. Anxiety can come out in kids as very destructive. I can tell you it comes out sometimes destructive in adults, right? People that are so fearful that they're going to be abandoned sometimes become really violent as adults. We see that in domestic violence situations. Their anxiety is too intolerable, and they believe the person, in front of them is the one producing the anxiety, and they have to control that. That's where, domestic violence situations come from. The control is about, I'm afraid I'm not going to be in control. But kids do this, and it's really less obvious that it's anxiety, but I promise you it is, right? Kids that are constantly in trouble, always down at the principal's office, they have a level of anxiety, and the problem is they can't identify it. So kids that are fearful, it's really easy to say, what are you afraid of right now? And they can say, I'm afraid of X, Y, and Z. Kids that are angry, if you say, what are you afraid of right now? Or what are you feeling anxious about? They're like, what? I'm not feeling anxious, because anger is a defense mechanism to anxiety. Anger is a defense mechanism to having to deal with being afraid, having to deal with feeling sad, having to deal with feeling anxious. And so that comes out in this really destructive thing. And truthfully, most people in almost every environment I know, mental health, school, parents, grandparents, right? Athletes, whatever that is, coaches, when we see a kid, a student, a child that is angry, we don't associate it with anxiety. But what I can tell you is most kids that are angry have gotten that way because they've spent so much time anxious and afraid, whether they were abused or abandoned or neglected, right? And they became so afraid that they weren't going to be taken care of that they get really mad, right? Really anxious, and they take out all their frustration, all their anxiety, all their fear in anger toward other people. Okay, so that's one way. Another way is kids become so afraid in a social interaction that they might become the bully. Like, we know that bullies have a lot of anxiety. That's why they bully, right? It's the same thing we were talking about with the domestic violence. Bullies were bullied at some point, right? And that produced anxiety. And instead of internalizing it and becoming sad and fearful, they externalized it and tried to control their environment and became angry so that they didn't have to fear anybody. If I'm the angry one, I don't have to be afraid of any of you, right? So that's how it kind of comes out. So if you're sitting on this call today and your kid is crying anxious, it's probably easy for you to identify. You're probably saying things like, why is my kid so afraid all the time? How do I help them be less afraid? And if you're on this call today and you've got a really angry child, well, they're still anxious. It's just a different version. They're just expressing it in a different way. Now, the response as a parent is the same. How can I help you? Let's talk through the feeling, okay? And you're going to get a lot of content back. You're going to get a lot of, I don't like that you did this, and I think you're taking my control away. Fear about control. I'm really upset. I don't want to go to school. I don't want to lose you. Fear of abandonment, right? It's all fear-based. That's what anxiety is. Either way, if you are feeling like you don't know how to help your child, talk them through it. How can I help you? What are you feeling? I see that you're feeling angry. What do you think it's about? If you get answers like, I don't know, stop asking me, it might be time to get an intervention and find a therapist. It's okay too that you can't help your own child. It's okay that you would need a therapist to help you help your child or help your child themselves. It's okay, right? If I broke my foot, if I had a sprained ankle, I'd go to someone that could help me. I could probably figure it out. I could probably do some stuff at home that would help, but I'd go to a specialist because I'd wanted to get better. Seeing a therapist is the same way. The other way anxiety comes out is in depression. Many times kids that are anxious for way too long become sad. They become isolated, they withdraw, they go right inside themselves, and it's very hard to get them out. And I'm going to be honest with you, if your child is in that place, it's going to be hard to talk them through their anxiety. Where you're at, if your kid has become, there's sort of three things, right? If your child's become so anxious that they can't move, right? They're paralyzed by their anxiety. If your child's become so angry that they've become violent and it's disruptive, or if your child's become so anxious that they're depressed and sad and isolating, you need to find a therapist. I often recommend, because I can tell you firsthand, professionally and personally, that
having an anxious child, whether they be, crying anxious, angry anxious, or isolated anxious, is very disruptive. You can't just go to dinner when you want. You can't just go on vacation wherever you want. You can't just go to the mall. You can't just have people over. It becomes debilitating as a family unit. That's when you need somebody to help you. And I often recommend to parents, if your child is in therapy, get your own therapy too, because you're going to have to learn how to help that child, right? But you're also going to have to talk about the debilitating effects of what your family has been going through. Face the situation, don't wait. Make sure that it's not been 10 years, 12 years, 16 years, 22 years, and your child is still experiencing the same thing. If they're experiencing that over that long of a period of time, it's not going away. They need help. And if they could do it themselves, they would. And if you could help them, you would. Nobody would ever want their child to, live that long of a period of time anxious. So it's okay to get the help, and it's okay not to let it go until it's too late, meaning they can't get a job, they can't graduate school, they can't leave your house, right? That's where anxiety leads to, okay? If anxiety is left long enough, people become hopeless and helpless. And when people become hopeless and helpless, that is where we start to see those depressive, suicidal thoughts, okay? Anxiety is sometimes the start of that. Anxious that they can't get to their phone, anxious that they don't know they were dropped from a group chat, right? Anxious that something happens socially in school. Those anxieties build over time, and it's really helpful to bring them down, right? Some of those other environmental factors that are super important for us as parents to keep our kids safe from anxiety, making sure their phones are turned off at night, making sure their phones are not accessible in their bedrooms. They do still sell alarm clocks. We don't actually have to use our phone as alarm clocks. My kids' phones are in the hallway. They are plugged in. They're not in their bedrooms, and both my kids have alarm clocks. Why? Because I don't want their phones going off all night. I don't want the notifications going off all night. My son is 17. He will be on the phone with his friends all night. Nothing's bad happening, but why allow that, right? So it's our job to put in place guardrails for our kids to be successful. If you notice your child is successful, is anxious over something socially that is going on in the phone, take the phone away. If the phone is producing the anxiety, take away the phone. Ask them what's going on with their friend group. Find out what they're anxious about. I've had many teens in therapy who became anxious because they were dropped from a friend group or they were blocked from a group conversation. And I've watched and witnessed that level of panic. It's not anxiety anymore, it's panic. If you're noticing that your kids are panicking when they can't get to their phone, there's a problem. If they're anxious when they can't get to their phone, there's a problem. It's our job to set up those guardrails and take away the things that are producing the anxiety. We don't let 4-year-olds watch horror films because it would produce too much anxiety. It would produce too much fear for a 4-year-old to watch a horror film. If a phone and a social interaction is producing too much anxiety or panic for your child, it's time to take away the phone. If they could handle the phone, it wouldn't be providing panic. Okay. If they are panicking over social interactions on the phone, it means something's happening that's above their developmental grade, their developmental capability. And it's our job to set those guardrails. Okay. And trust me when I say there are many things happening inside your children's phones socially that are causing them anxiety. There's also things they're watching that are causing them anxiety. Their brains are not wired for this yet. Okay. And it's our job to set the guardrails. The last thing I want to talk about before I open this up for questions is modeling your own good mental health. If you've been anxious most of your life, if you come from a long line of people that have been anxious, and you know that it's nature and nurture, you know that there's some DNA component to, your kids being anxious or you being anxious. Being able to take those steps to correct that for you is really the best modeling you can do for your kids. As adults, not getting anxious over social interactions is modeling for our kids. Not getting anxious over phone conversations is modeling for our kids. Putting our phones down and not obsessively looking on Facebook to see what people are saying about us or doing about us is modeling for our kids. Watching adults talk through their anxiety, pumping ourselves up in front of our kids. I got this. I'm anxious about this, but I got this. I think it'll be okay. In fact, I know it'll be okay. Watching us do that is coaching. And we don't even think about it like that, right? But we model for our kids how to deal with anxiety. And the reality is stress happens in life. We're going to be anxious about things, but we can absolutely learn and model for our kids what a healthy reaction to anxiety looks like. So that is what I have for you today. Model things for your child. Be the person in your child's life that they can see dealing with their own stuff, getting help when they need it, putting their phone down when it's been too much, having healthy relationships in their life. Be the model. You can do it. You got this. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. Scott, I don't know if I can see the hand raised now.
I can take care of it all. Miss
Cool.
Massara?
Hi.
Hi, Jeanette.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. So, unfortunately, I dealt with one of my children when she hit high school, actually. She went through a terrible, debilitating anxiety. I mean, that it affected her to the point that, she couldn't function. And as you had mentioned, that was the time to intervene with, some real help. The problem that I found, and it happened more than one time, was finding a good health professional, actually. First of all, how to be a pediatric psychiatrist.
Yes.
And then finding one that actually cared. As horrible as that sounds, it was very much like, in and out or abrupt, or I couldn't get medication filled. She did have to go on medication in order to function. And she did actually function okay after that. But
Awesome.
I find it's really
Awesome.
hard to find people to help, including therapists.
So I can tell you in 26 years of being a therapist, I've had a really difficult time finding good psychiatrists in the community. But I have found one that's actually fairly close to the Wayne area, which is Hamilton Behavioral Care. They have therapists as well as psychiatrists on staff. What I found is that once the psychiatrist can write the medication initially, many times the pediatrician will just continue to fill it. And a lot of pediatricians now are starting to treat anxiety and depression because there is such a lack in care in pediatric psychiatry. But I will tell you that I use Hamilton Behavioral Care in Paramus. They do virtual sessions, they do in-person sessions with huge success. I've been using them for probably 5 years now. I literally got rid of my list of psychiatrists, and they also take insurance.
Okay, great. I will look into that. She's actually at this point 20 years old, graduated high school.
I'm so glad to hear
luckily.
your success story, honestly.
Well, I mean, she still suffers greatly from anxiety. She's still on medication, which I'd like to find out if she still needs it. I mean,
Right.
that would have to be a discussion between her and her psychiatrist, but she does need a therapist because she doesn't like to do, she's having struggles with over the phone. She wants to do
Okay.
in person, and no one's really taking in person these
So-
days.
It's interesting. We actually, I have 5 locations for offices, and we came back one-on-one in person from after COVID, like 6 months after. We've been in person for almost a year and a half now. And I don't necessarily understand the providers that are not back in person. I don't know what I mean, I suppose it's easier, but I just, I've being a therapist for so long, I really don't like virtual therapy at all. So we do have an office right in Wayne. If you want to call and get her an appointment, we have 3 providers in that office.
Okay, that would be great too. Is there a way?
And they're in person.
Can
Yeah,
I give my information to somebody to,
you know
find out?
what? If you want to write this number down and give them a call tomorrow morning, we have an intake department and they will take your information and they'll get you an appointment, or they'll get her an appointment.
okay, that'd be great. Hold on one
So
second.
it's
let me just-
973. Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, I just need a piece of paper. I wasn't expecting. Hold
Oh,
on.
yeah,
Sorry,
no
sorry.
worries. I
Oh,
wonder,
no.
can we write this somewhere, like in, is there like a comment section, Scott?
I got it. 973.
691 3030
2030.
extension 1. And ask for the Wayne office.
Extension 1, Wayne office. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for your input. Scott, I think you're muted.
Oh, there we are.
No worries.
All right, so I know we did have a couple questions.
Great.
See that. And so what are some strategies for parents to use to help regulate themselves during an episode of anxiety in their child?
Oh my gosh, I'm going to be honest with you. That was one of the hardest things I had to deal with for myself when my daughter's anxiety was really peaked, was really keeping myself calm. And so, and I'll be honest, I my husband and I really would have to tag team. I mean, I would have to tap out and say, like, I need a minute, and I would have to do that deep breathing and then kind of come back in. But what I will say, looking back now, sort of at that time, I needed to get her help well before I did. And I'm a therapist, like, and I didn't get her. I thought it was developmental. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Looking back, I didn't realize it had been like 4 years of this, right? It was like, you just go through it every single day. So the 2 things I'm going to say are, if you find yourself having to ask that question, it might be that your child has pervasive anxiety that's happening a lot. And because you're living with it, you're not realizing how it's really here. So that's number 1. And number 2 is to do your own breathing and your own self-care. Like, if you have a child that needs 110% of you, you have to make sure you're taking care of yourself first.
All right, awesome. And then are there certain things that you hear from parents that that they're trying to be helpful but are just not, like maybe 1 or 2 things that a parent may typically go to during that moment of anxiety in their child that even though all purposes are positive and you're trying to help, but they're really detrimental and without even knowing it?
2 things I've heard parents say, and it's when they've gotten to a place that they're done. They're tapped out at their own limit. And I've heard parents say, "What is wrong with you?" And the answer to that is, I don't know. If I knew what was wrong with me, I sure as heck wouldn't be doing this, right? And if a kid, if you're dealing with a 2, 4, 6-year-old, they may not say that. But even my 17-year-old, if I say, "What the heck is wrong with you?" he's going to say to me, "I don't know. If I knew, I'd stop doing what I was doing," right?
Yeah.
So empathy is super important. Super important. I am so sorry you are feeling this way. How can I help you? I don't know. Okay, I'm here. Whatever it is, I'm here. I'm so sorry you're feeling like this. Okay. Saying, "What the heck is wrong with you?"
it's because we're feeling helpless. It's because we as parents are going, why can't I stop this?
Mhm.
And saying what the heck is wrong with you just really makes it worse.
For sure.
The second thing I've heard parents say is, it's not that bad. It's not that bad as a perception, right? No, my kids don't have to walk up and down hill to school in the snow without their whatever, right? My kids don't have it as bad as I had. What are you so anxious about? You have everything, it's not that bad. Perception is 100% anxiety. Anxiety is 100% perception, right? I don't know if I'm going to fail the test, but I'm so anxious that that's my perception. The perception is what's causing the anxiety. So to say to someone, it's not that bad, really invalidates the person's experience. What I would say is, this sounds like you feel like it's really bad. It sounds like you feel like it's really bad. I don't know if it's that bad or not, but it clearly you feel like it is. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, it certainly validates their feelings. And, ironically enough, as a math teacher, I was always cautious to say, this is easy, you should know this. And it's in that same vein of perception. And you don't want to, give the kids the perception. If you tell them this is easy and they don't get it, what does that make them feel in their confidence? So in the
Yes.
same vein, if they're feeling a certain way, you're saying it's not that bad, but like, you don't know what that feels like for them. And in their world, their mind, like you said, perception is reality, and their perception is they're going to
Right.
fail. They're going to, insert, negative term. They're going to feel that way. We may not
Right.
see that as parents or see that as teachers or administrators, but we need to validate their feelings so that they feel comfortable in continuing to share. So I mean, you hit the couple other questions we had, say that are not helpful. So from a parent perspective, how do you balance typical stress from that problematic anxiety that kids deal with?
So how do I deal with my own stress or my kids' stress?
But I would say, how do you balance, as a parent, how do you know what is typical stress that kids go through
Right.
versus, all right, this is a problem. The anxiety is a problem. Like you said, going through high school, there's always ups and downs, right? And we know mental health, it's, you go through stages, and some people just can't manage it as well as others. So how do you know, or what are some of the signs that as a parent, typical anxiety, like typical stresses and anxiety that kids have versus this is problematic and we need to seek further care or more intensive care?
When it's disrupting their day, when it's disrupting the way they live their life. They're not going to school, they're not showering, they're not going out with friends, they're on their phone constantly, they're not, it's just all the time, and it's totally disruptive. Like I was saying before, you can't go out to dinner, you can't have people over, there's constant arguing in your house. Like when it becomes that high level is when, really you need to get the intervention before that. But certainly if you're already here, developmentally appropriate is it's situational, right? Like I have a test, I'm a little nervous about it, versus give me my phone, I want my phone, I need to see what they're saying. You can see the difference in the person.
Yeah.
I mean, when your kid literally can't sit through a movie without picking up their phone, there's an issue. Right? When they can't sit through dinner, for 25 minutes of dinner, if your child can't sit through dinner without checking in see what their friends said, you have an issue. And that's where we see it becomes their day. It becomes part of every single thing they do. I think Joanne's, I hope it was Joanne that was talking about her daughter who's 20 now, she stopped functioning.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you know it's not developmental any longer.
All right, awesome. Does anybody else have any questions? We'll give a couple more minutes. We'll hang out for a minute or so. But before everybody does leave and we shut off the recording, I just want to say thank you again to Kelly. It's an
welcome.
amazing thing. It was so beneficial to everybody that signed in. We're going to be posting this recording, and I will share it out with all the principals at the secondary level so that you guys have the link, so that they have the link. So if you need to go back through hear anything, see anything that happened, you certainly can. We're super excited. Our next session is going to be April 26th, which is in 2 weeks. That one is going to cover understanding teen depression. In a similar vein, how to balance those two. And even though they are interconnected and related, we have to look at each one individually so we could understand and how to address each one of those. So I want to say thank you again to Tri-County. Thank you again to Kelly.
Welcome.
Awesome session. We'll hang on here. So if anybody has any more questions, we could certainly answer them.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the questions. Really, if you do need anything, you can always reach out to Scott. They know how to get in touch with me. We can put it onto the next presentation too, if you have other questions.
For sure. And like I said, for everybody here, if you have questions, just email me or email your building principal and they can forward it over to me. Thank you again.